Before I was a grandfather, I was a high school football coach for 31 years. People think coaching is about plays and formations. It isn't. It's about reading people, knowing when a kid is lying to you, knowing when a parent is hiding something, knowing when something is deeply, fundamentally wrong, even when everyone around you is smiling and saying everything is fine. That skill saved my grandson's life last February. My daughter Lee is 34 years old. She's beautiful, smart, and married to a man named Brett, who I have never fully trusted. Not from the day she brought him home for Thanksgiving 7 years ago. He's the kind of man who shakes your hand too hard and laughs a little too loud at his own jokes. My wife Helen used to tell me I was being too hard on him. Maybe I was. I wanted to be wrong about Brett. For Lee's sake, I wanted to be completely wrong. They have 2 kids. Their biological son Cooper is 9, and then there's Marcus. No, wait, I need to stop myself there. His name is Joel, 7 years old. Brown eyes so dark they look almost black. He came to them through foster care when he was 4, and the adoption was finalized 2 years ago last March. There was a whole party for it, balloons, a cake that said, "Forever Family." I still have photos of that day on my refrigerator. Joel is grinning in every single one of them, gap-toothed and wearing a little clip-on tie that kept sliding sideways. I kept straightening it all afternoon and he kept wiggling it crooked again, laughing every time like it was the funniest thing in the world. That was the last time I remember him laughing without something sad behind his eyes. I noticed it gradually. The way Joel got quieter at family dinners, the way Cooper would say things, casually, like they were nothing, about his new video game or his new bike or the weekend trip the 3 of them took to the water park, and Joel would just sit there eating his mashed potatoes, not looking up. My wife saw it too, but she said kids are different. She said Joel was just the quieter type. I didn't push it because I didn't want to be the meddling grandfather. I'd coached enough families to know that interference, even well-meaning interference, can do damage. I wish I had pushed it sooner. The call came on a Thursday night in early February. It was 11:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone alarm clock when I heard it ring and thought, who is calling at this hour? And then I saw it was Joel's school tablet number, the one the school assigned so kids can do homework, and my stomach dropped before I even answered. Grandpa. His voice was so small, like he was trying to take up as little space as possible even on the phone. Joel? Buddy, what's going on? Why are you up? There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. I'm thirsty, he said, and I can't. The kitchen door has a thing on it. I sat up in bed. What do you mean a thing on it? A lock. The kind you need a key for. And I already drank all the water in my bathroom and I've been really thirsty since dinner and I didn't want to bother anybody. But there's nobody here to bother anyway. I was already standing. Joel, where are your mom and dad? Another pause. Longer this time. They went on a trip. With Cooper. It's a big boat. They left Tuesday. It was Thursday night. My daughter had left a 7-year-old boy alone in a house for over 2 days. A 7-year-old with a kitchen that was locked. A 7-year-old who had waited until almost midnight to call his grandfather because he didn't want to bother anybody. I don't have words for what moved through me in that moment. I felt fear before. I felt anger before. What I felt standing next to my bed at 11:47 p.m. in February was something that didn't have a name. Something cold and certain and very, very focused. I'm coming, Joel, I said. Right now, don't hang up the phone. He lives 40 minutes from me. I did it in 26. Helen wanted to come. I told her to stay home and start making calls to our family attorney, to anyone she could reach, because I didn't know yet what I was going to find in that house, and I wanted someone already moving. She was on the phone before I hit the highway. The house was dark when I pulled up, except for the small glow of a nightlight in the upstairs hallway window. I had a spare key. Lee gave it to me 2 years ago when they first moved in. I remember thinking at the time it was a gesture of trust, how I was using it to enter my daughter's house in the middle of the night to rescue a child they had apparently decided didn't need to come on vacation with them. Joel was sitting at the top of the stairs when I came in. He had a blanket wrapped around his shoulders and his tablet in his lap. He'd been waiting there since we hung up, he told me later, because he was afraid if he went back to his room, he wouldn't hear me knock. I picked him up. He didn't say anything. He just pressed his face into my shoulder, and I could feel him shaking slightly. Not crying, just shaking, like something in him had been coiled very tight for a very long time and didn't know yet that it was allowed to unwind. I carried him to the kitchen. The door to it had a keyed half-deadbolt installed on the outside, the kind you'd put on a storage room, not a kitchen in a family home. I got Joel a large glass of water and then another one, and I watched him drink them both standing at the counter in his socks and his blanket, and I had to work very hard to keep my face neutral. I asked him gently what he'd been eating. He showed me. In his room there was a plastic bin with a snap-on lid. Inside, 2 cans of soup, a sleeve of crackers, a jar of peanut butter, 4 granola bars, and an apple that had started to go soft. That was what they left him. That was the plan they'd made for their 7-year-old child while they took their other child on a cruise that, I would later find out, cost them $11,000. There was a handwritten note taped to the inside of the bin lid. It said, "School bus comes at 7:40. Emergency number is 911. Be good." That was it. No neighbor they'd asked to check in. No family member they'd called. Just a bin of shelf-stable food and a reminder of when the bus came. The school, I would learn the next day, had been calling Lee's cell for 2 days because Joel had told his teacher on Wednesday that his parents were away and he wasn't sure when they were coming back. The school had left 4 voicemails. Nobody called back. I took Joel home with me that night. He fell asleep in my guest room within 10 minutes, still holding the edge of the blanket like a lifeline. I sat in the kitchen with Helen and we looked at each other, and I think we both understood that something had shifted permanently. Some version of our family that had existed before that night was not going to exist after it. I found out the details over the next 12 hours. Brett's brother worked for a luxury travel company and had gotten them a deal. 11 days on a Caribbean cruise, departing from Port Canaveral with stops in the Bahamas, Jamaica, and Grand Cayman. Lee and Brett and Cooper had left the previous Tuesday morning. They were due back the following Wednesday. That was 11 days. 11 days that Joel was supposed to manage alone in a house with a locked kitchen, a bin of crackers, and the instruction to call 911 in an emergency. The reason Joel hadn't been included, I later learned through his school counselor who had been quietly watching the situation for months, was that this had been framed to Joel as a Cooper's birthday trip. Cooper's birthday being in January. Joel had been told there wasn't room. He had been told maybe next year. He had been told a lot of things, apparently, over the course of years, that added up to a very clear message even a 7-year-old could understand. I called our attorney, a man named Bernard, first thing Friday morning. Bernard is in his 60s, semi-retired, and has been handling our family's legal matters for 22 years. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time when I finished. "Carl," he said. "That's my name, Carl. What you're describing is child abandonment under Florida statute. That's not a gray area. That's a crime." He told me not to contact Lee or Brett yet. He told me to document everything. Photographs of the food bin, the note, the kitchen lock, Joel's condition, the school's call records. He told me to take Joel to a pediatrician that same day for an examination and to get that documented too. I did all of it. The pediatrician noted that Joel was mildly dehydrated, had lost approximately 4 pounds since his last visit 6 weeks prior, and showed signs of anxiety consistent with prolonged stress. She was a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Tu, Ellison, who chose her words carefully, but I could see in her face what she wasn't saying out loud. I contacted the cruise line. It took most of Friday afternoon, but I eventually reached a customer service supervisor who confirmed the booking and then transferred me to their onboard communication team. I explained that I needed to reach my daughter regarding a family emergency involving her minor child. After a significant amount of back and forth, they agreed to have a staff member deliver a message to her cabin. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Lee. She didn't sound concerned. She sounded annoyed. "Dad, what is going on?" They knocked on our door during dinner. "Where are you right now?" "I'm in the hallway outside the dining room." "Why?" "Is Brett with you?" "He's inside with Cooper." "Dad, seriously, what?" "Joel called me Thursday night at midnight," I said. "He was thirsty and the kitchen was locked. I drove to your house and picked him up. He's been with me since then. I've spoken to an attorney. I've spoken to his pediatrician. And I've spoken to the school. Who called you 4 times this week?" Silence. Then, He's fine, Dad. We left him everything he needed. There are moments in life when someone says something to you that is so profoundly wrong that your brain actually has trouble processing it as language. It just arrives as noise, disconnected from meaning. Because meaning would require it to make some kind of sense. He's fine, Dad. You left a 7-year-old child alone in a house for 11 days, I said. My voice was very calm. I had coached for 31 years. I knew how to be very calm when I needed something to land. With a locked kitchen and a note, more silence. It was supposed to be okay, she said, and her voice had changed. Something had cracked in it. I thought Mrs. Hensley next door said she'd check. Mrs. Meadpry. Hensley's daughter had a baby last month, I said. She's been in Gainesville for 3 weeks. I already spoke with her this morning. She had no idea. Nobody knew Lee. Nobody was checking on him. I heard her start to cry. Part of me, the part that would always be her father first, ached at that sound. I'd heard her cry 100 times over 60-odd years of life. When she was little and scraped her knees. When her first boyfriend broke her heart. When she lost a pregnancy before Cooper was born, but I didn't reach toward it this time. I let it sit there. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm retaining emergency temporary custody of Joel pending a court hearing. Bernard has already filed the paperwork. When you return to Port Canaveral, there will be law enforcement present. I want you to understand that clearly before you dock. This is not me being angry, Lee. This is me doing the only thing I can do for that boy right now. You have 6 more days on that ship. I'd suggest you use them to think about how you're going to explain your choices to a family court judge. I hung up before she could respond. What followed was one of the more surreal weeks of my life. Brett called me twice, once to threaten, once to plead. I let both go to voicemail and forwarded them to Bernard. Lee's mother-in-law called Helen and cried for 40 minutes. My own son, Lee's brother Peter, called me from Denver asking if there was any way to handle this privately. I told him there wasn't. Some things you can't handle privately. Joel spent that week at our house. He slept later than he had in years, Helen told me. She checked on him every morning, and he was still asleep at 8, 9, sometimes 9:30. Like his body was finally allowing itself to rest the way it hadn't been able to in a long time. He ate everything we put in front of him. He watched movies on the couch with Helen wrapped in an old quilt she'd had since before Lee was born. He beat me 4 times in a row at checkers and was very gracious about it. On the 4th day, he asked me why they hadn't taken him on the boat. I sat across from him at the kitchen table. I'm 67 years old. I've coached teenagers through injuries and losses and family crises, and I still didn't know how to answer that question in a way that was honest without being cruel. What do you tell a 7-year-old about the particular breed of human selfishness that decides one child matters more than another? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said. Really big ones. And it's never, Joel, listen to me. It is never because of anything you did or anything that's wrong with you. You hear me? He looked at me for a long moment. Cooper said I'm not their real kid, he said. He says it a lot. I kept my hands flat on the table. I kept my face steady. Cooper is wrong, I said. You are as real as anyone in this family. More real than some. He seemed to think about this. Then he nodded, very small, and asked if we could have grilled cheese for lunch. We had grilled cheese. Lee and Brett docked in Port Canaveral on a Wednesday morning. 2 officers from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office were waiting as Bernard had coordinated. They were not arrested on the pier. Bernard had advised that cooperation would serve them better in front of a family court judge than a dramatic dockside arrest. But they were formally notified of the emergency custody order, interviewed on site, and driven to the local substation to give statements. Cooper went with Brett's parents, who had driven down from Ocala. The family court hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. I want to be honest about what those 3 weeks were like. They were not triumphant. There's nothing triumphant about watching your daughter's life come apart in slow motion. Lee called me twice from her parents' house. She and Brett had gone to his parents in Ocala while the legal situation sorted itself. The first call, she spent most of it crying and asking me to make it stop. The second call, she was angry, and she said things that I won't repeat here. Things that I think she said out of fear and shame and misdirected grief. Things I hope she one day understands I have tried to forgive. Brett said nothing to me directly after that first week. Bernard told me he'd retained an attorney of his own. The hearing lasted most of a day. The judge was a woman in her mid-50s who had the particular quality of absolute stillness that I associate with people who have seen a great deal and are no longer surprised by much. She reviewed the documentation, the school call logs, the pediatric assessment, the photographs of the food bin, the note, the kitchen lock, the cruise booking records. She reviewed Joel's statements made to a child therapist the week prior. She listened to Lee's attorney argue that this was a terrible lapse in judgment, but not indicative of a pattern, that Lee and Brett were otherwise attentive parents, that Joel was generally well cared for. Then she looked at the photographs of the food bin for a long moment. She looked at the note. School bus comes at 7:40. Emergency number is 911. Be good. She awarded me temporary legal guardianship of Joel, pending a 6-month review. She required Lee and Brett to complete parenting classes, family therapy, and a home evaluation before any reunification visits could occur, and she ordered those visits to be supervised. She also referred the matter to the state attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges under Florida's child abandonment statute. I don't know yet how that will resolve. Bernard says it could go several ways. What I know is this. Joel has been with us for 11 weeks now. He has a room at the end of our hallway with a window that catches the afternoon light, and Helen has let him paint it whatever color he wants. He chose a blue so dark it's almost navy, which I think is a very specific and confident choice for a 7-year-old. He is in therapy twice a week with a woman who specializes in children from the foster system, and she told me in our first parent meeting that he is doing the work, which in her field apparently means something significant. He still wakes up sometimes in the middle of the night. Not every night, but sometimes. Helen or I will hear him, and one of us will go down the hall and sit in the chair in his room until he falls back asleep. He doesn't say much on those nights. Sometimes he just wants the light left off. Sometimes he falls back asleep in 2 minutes, and I sit there anyway in the dark for a while, listening to him breathe. Last week he came downstairs while I was watching a football game, old habits, and climbed up next to me on the couch without saying anything and fell asleep against my arm during the third quarter. I didn't move for 2 hours. I would have sat there all night. There are things I still don't fully understand. I don't understand how Lee, my daughter, who I watched grow up, who I coached through her own hard years, who I thought I knew, arrived at a place where leaving a 7-year-old alone in a locked house for 11 days seemed like a plan that could work. I don't understand what happened to the woman in those photographs at the adoption finalization. The one holding Joel with the cake and the balloons and the Forever Family sign. I hope she's still in there somewhere. I hope she's doing the work too. But Joel doesn't wait for her to find her way back. Joel gets on the school bus every morning and comes home every afternoon and does homework at the kitchen table and beats me at checkers and asks for grilled cheese and sleeps in his navy blue room at the end of the hallway. And every single morning when he comes downstairs, I am standing at the stove with coffee and whatever he wants for breakfast. Every single morning. He knows I'm going to be there. I've made sure of that, because that's the one thing, the most basic, most fundamental thing that I can give him right now. Not a cruise, not an $11,000 trip, not balloons or cake or a party. Just, I will be here when you wake up. You don't have to be thirsty and alone in the dark wondering if anyone is coming. I'm coming. I was always going to come. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that February night. Not in any mystical way. I'm too old and too practical for that. Just in the plain, mechanical way that a man who spent 31 years coaching teenagers understands it. What you do has consequences. What you choose, consistently, over time, shapes the world around you in ways you can't always see until it's too late to change them. Lee and Brett made a series of choices. Small ones first, probably. The kind that feel harmless in the moment. Skipping Joel at a family outing here. Leaving him out of a conversation there, letting Cooper's birthday become the reason Joel didn't get a seat at the table. Each one small enough to rationalize, each one adding up to something that a 7-year-old boy absorbed into his bones. As simple truth, I am not the one who matters here. That is the consequence I find hardest to sit with. Not the locked kitchen, not the 11 days alone. Those were the visible, documentable things. The things that ended up in court records. The harder thing, the one that doesn't show up in any filing, is what Joel believed about himself by the time I picked him up that night. The way he said he didn't want to bother anybody, the way he'd waited hours before calling me. A child who has been treated as an afterthought long enough eventually stops expecting to be treated any differently. Reversing that takes a different kind of work. It takes consistency. It takes showing up not just in the crisis, but on the ordinary Tuesday when nothing is happening and you make grilled cheese and sit across the table and just be there. That's what I've come to understand about what a child actually needs. Not grand gestures, not speeches, not even apologies from the people who hurt them. Just the slow, repeated proof that someone reliable exists in their world. I think about the note they left him. School bus comes at 7:40. Emergency numbers 911. Be good. What strikes me most about it now is that last part, be good, as though the burden of good behavior was something Joel needed reminding of, as though the standard he was being held to required no reciprocal standard from the adults in the house. That's backwards. That's always been backwards. The obligation runs the other direction. You bring a child into your home, you make yourself responsible for them, not in the legal paperwork sense only, but in the daily, unglamorous, sometimes exhausting sense of showing up and doing the work. Ethics isn't complicated. It's just, you said you would take care of him. So take care of him. You don't get to decide that only applies when it's convenient. I won't pretend I have Leaf figured out. I don't. She is my daughter, and I love her, and I am also deeply, honestly bewildered by the person who made those choices. Those two things live together uncomfortably in me, and I've stopped trying to resolve them. What I know is that she's in therapy now, and so is Brett, and so is Joel, all three separately, which seems right to me. Some damage you have to work through without shortcuts. Joel beat me at checkers again last night, 5 times in a row. He counted each one. He's gonna be okay. I know that the way I used to know when a kid on my team had what it took. Not because everything is fine right now, but because of the way he keeps getting up every morning and walking out into the day like it's worth showing up for. It is worth showing up for. I intend to keep proving that to him every single day I have left.